Good day, and welcome to this webinar on the America's Marine Highway Program and Marine Highway Module of the Port Planning and Investment Toolkit. I am Shannon McLeod with WSP and a primary author of the Port Planning and Investment Toolkit. I will be your moderator during this 90-minute webinar. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items to note. This webinar is being recorded, both the presentation and the audio. Everyone registered for today's session will receive an email with a link to the presentation once the information has been posted. All participants have been placed in listen-only mode. Just in case, we ask that everyone mute their microphones. If you have a question for a presenter, feel free to type it into the chat box near the bottom of the control panel, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can during the allotted time. Between each of the presentations, we will pause for a short poll question and we'll review your answers after allowing a few seconds for everyone to respond. After the webinar and Q&A session, you'll receive a short survey. We urge you to complete the survey. Your feedback is valuable in helping AAPA and MARAD improve their programs and content. I am pleased to be joined in this webinar by Richard Balzano, the U.S. Department of Transportation Maritime Administration's Deputy Administrator, and Mauricio Castro, MARAD's Office of Ports and Waterways Planning Transportation Specialist, both of whom will discuss the details of the America's Marine Highway Program. AAPA's Public Affairs Director, Aaron Ellis, who will provide an overview of the Port Planning and Investment Toolkit. Alan Myers, a Principal Consultant with WSP, who will summarize the planning, feasibility, and funding details of the Marine Highway Module. Daniel Legrand and Aaron Ouellette with the Port of Virginia, who will share information about their port's James River Expansion Project. And Greg Johnson with the Port of Greater Baton Rouge, who will conclude the webinar with information about the Baton Rouge New Orleans shuttle service operated by Secor AMH. After that, we'll go into the Q&A session. Now, please join me in welcoming Deputy Administrator Balzano, who will kick off the webinar.
Well, thank you, Shannon, and thank you for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I am very pleased to be here. I first want to give a big thanks to Bill Pappy and his team, Mauricio Castro, Travis Black, and Tim Pickering. Thank you guys for pushing this forward. This is a big deal, and this is a big way forward for MARAD and the industry. I also want to thank our partners involved in this, and that is AAPA. Chris Connor and his team, great job. We've really enjoyed working with you. You guys are a critical link to the industry for us, and it's helping us all get better. So to just get started here, the overall goal of this was to help us all get better. Better, smarter, more informed investments, better planning, better participation, better grants and loan applications. And all of this ties into one common thing, and that is efficiency. Efficiency that we greatly need in our ports and in our intermodal connections. We're running out of space, trade is increasing, population will increase, technology is advancing rapidly, and unlike some of our international partners, we are a free market. Our ports are owned and operated by very many different entities, all which do business differently. They have different procedures, different goals, different priorities. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That's the free market. We like that. But what that does is that puts efficiency sometimes to the side and it lets the system focus on individual components, which is fine, except for it doesn't help the system to be more efficient. And I bring that up because when I got asked to do this, I keep thinking back in 2018, the secretary asked me to come with her on a trip to China. So I had several meetings throughout my time there with various different entities in their maritime organization. And a common question kept being asked of me: why are your ports so inefficient? The Chinese government would ask me. Why do you not maximize the use of your inland waterways? And I tried to explain to them that it is a free market, and that there are different owners and different operators and different market events that they're trying to answer to. And it's not all controlled by one state entity that is, trying to maximize the size of the barges going up and down their rivers. So it's a different system. It's a good system, but it needs help. So this tool, this effort by MERIT, this cooperative agreement with AAPA is very needed. It is helping us drive some formatting, some formation of the entire process so that we are making better decisions. We are looking at smarter investments as we look down the future. What are the things we need? How do we maintain our equipment? How do we maintain our property? All those types of things are going to pay off not only for you as the operator and owners of these ports, but also us as a nation. Because the more efficient we can become, the better use we can make of our facilities, and the better we can make our transportation system and cargo system work. It's about training the people. There's just so many parts of this that are just important and critically connected. So I really applaud the efforts on this. I know this is the third installment, I believe, and this one's really going to focus on port planning and investment toolkits. This is going to help us, quite honestly, because now when we get these applications in, it helps us make a better informed decision. And it's helping you, the ports and operators, make better informed decisions on what you're going to ask for. So that's really what I'm trying to push for. If Chris O'Connor's on the line, which I hope he is, Chris, I would like to bring up one item that we talked about when you came over and met with us. And that is, I really appreciate this effort on the toolkit, and I would like to duplicate this effort with the issue of finding and networking with U.S. manufacturers to build the components that we need in our ports, fenders, bollards, possibly cranes, so that we can keep our grants and loan programs compliant with the Build America clauses. I'm happy to sign a cooperative agreement with AAPA to help really get that initiative going, because I think it's very important and it's something that's really going to help us in the future. I believe there are manufacturers out there who can answer this call. It's just a matter of getting them aware of the need and getting our ports communicating what they need to these U.S. manufacturers. So with that, Shannon, I'll turn it over to you, and I am looking forward to the presentations. I am a huge fan of the Marine Highway program. I think that program has great potential. I really want to see it grow. You are probably all very familiar with the Port Infrastructure Development Grant Program. The founding father of that is Congressman Diaz-Balart. And when I went over to brief him, as soon as that got passed, he and I spoke specifically about the Marine Highway and how underutilized that is at the moment, and how that program could really use some funding and some efforts to make that the best it can be. And he agreed. So let's hope that comes to fruition someday, because I really am a firm believer in the Marine Highway program. It's a win for everybody. It's jobs, it's getting trucks off the road, it's safety, it's environmentally efficient, it's cost effective. I mean, it literally is a win-win for everyone. So I'll stop there, Shannon, and turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Administrator Balzano. It's time for our first poll question, which I'm opening now. Do you know the 3 steps that are part of the America's Marine Highway program? I'll give you a few seconds to respond. Looks like 70% of you have voted. Here's the results. So 30% of you are familiar, 70% are not. Luckily, our next presenter, Mauricio Castro, will provide further details.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present on the Marine Highway Program and the benefits it can bring to all of us. Before I start, I would like to thank the Deputy Administrator Balsano for his comments and his support. Also, the American Association of Ports Authority for hosting this webinar, WSP for coordinating, and the Port of Virginia and the Port of Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Great Baton Rouge, New Orleans for sharing their experience with the Marine Highway Program. My name is Mauricio Castro, and I'm a transportation specialist leading the business development side for the Marine Highway Program. The purpose of this presentation is to provide general information and data of the benefits that the Marine Highway Program can bring to the industry, economy, and communities around the United States. The marine highways are cheaper, more fuel-efficient option for an overburdened transportation system. Highways are more congested than ever, and there are safety and environmental concerns with moving freight via rail. America's marine highways are an attractive alternative mode. Next. The need for domestic marine transportation is vital for the industry and the economy. Surges in international cargo concentrated at fewer ports contributes to significant port concentration. Large ports are encountering significant cargo volume flows and congested inland distribution corridors. The marine highway service offer an economic alternative to convey this cargo to second-tier ports with more efficient hinterland connections. It is now currently estimated that high cost of increased landside congestion is costing trucking industry more than $70 billion each year. Furthermore, the increasing number of trucks on highways and bridges are generating uncompensated infrastructure maintenance costs. America's marines waterways are an underutilized national resource with thousands of miles of uncongested capacity. Currently, the trucking system is struggling with a shortage of drivers and hours of service regulations that can lead to reduced productivity and increased costs when multiple truckers must move the same amount of freight. Qualified mariners and crew are readily available to operate vessels that can accommodate the heaviest of containers and trailers without adverse impact to landside infrastructure. Disruptive events effects on landside infrastructure. The United States is faced with disruptive weather event, natural disasters, and accessibility that impacts the nation's highways, roads, rail lines, and bridges. The marine transportation system offers redundancy benefits to support the continual supply of food, medicines, building materials, and other essential goods. Environmental sustainability awareness is increasing, and cargo owners are deciding to decarbonize and striving to meet sustainability goals for the supply chain. Marine highway service have the lowest environmental and social costs per ton miles of all transport modes. As you can see in the chart, the tonnage transported via waters has maintained and is increasing in comparison to other modes. And we can further utilize these existing navigable waters with more than just transporting bulk. Next. The marine highways are a logistics solution to a logistics problem. As you can see, congested highways with heavy traffic. Trains transporting cargo are cutting across through neighborhoods and towns. Therefore, another supply chain alternative would be the marine highways that requires little maintenance or repair. It offers environmental and economic benefits, and it touches 38 out of 50 states in the United States, including Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and the Virgin Islands is currently in the application process. Next. Through this illustration, we can continue making the case that America's waterways are an attractive alternative mode of transportation. By comparing cargo capacity that a barge can transport against rail cars and tractor trailers only strengthen this notion. Next. The America's Marine Highway Program consists of an American Marine Highway System of the vast majority of navigable waters inland waterways, coastlines, and Great Lakes in the United States and its territories. The Marine Highway Program consists of 3 steps. The first step is that it's the route designation that must be applied by a public entity. These are navigable waterways capable of moving freight that currently about 95% have been designated. The routes are designated by the Secretary of Transportation, and the route designation applications are accepted and reviewed throughout the year. The second step would be the project designation, which are proposals to create new or expand existing marine highway service on this designated route. These are designated by the Secretary of Transportation as well, and these applications are reviewed twice a year. The third step is the federal support. Applicants with a designated projects are eligible to apply for a marine highway grant. The nuance with this federal grant program is that private partners that are part of the designation that can apply to these grants with the sponsorship of a public entity. Grants are awarded once a year if funding is allocated by Congress. Next. The marine highway routes are solid system foundation from which service can operate. You can't have rail system without a rail network or a trucking system without a highway network. That requires integration of all our modes using the ports as critical links. As you can see from this map, there are currently 26 marine highway routes designated of navigable waters that can be utilized even more with the transportation of cargo that is containerized, palletized, or unitized for other potential markets. By designating these routes, USDOT is recognizing that the marine highway system is one piece in the total transportation system puzzle, and our program is designated to help you develop those pieces to better fit into that puzzle. Next. Now getting into the specifics of the project designation step, this is the second step. Eligible applicants consist of public entities such as state government or state DOT, metropolitan regional planning organizations, local governments, port authorities, tribal governments, and public-private partnerships are very much encouraged. The purpose of the project designation is to create new or expand marine highway services that realizes public benefits such as reduced congestion, road maintenance, fuel energy savings, reduce emissions, maintenance savings, safety, and so forth. Public sponsors of existing domestic marine transportation service on designated routes are encouraged to apply for a project designation. Next. Legislation states that the eligible freight for the program must be transported on U.S. documented vessels. The type of freight must be cargo shipped in discrete units or packages that are handled individually, palletized, or unitized for purpose of transportation, or freight vehicles carried on board commuter ferry boats. Freight in containers or trailers, roll-on, roll-off cargo such as new automobiles, palletized or unitized freight such as machinery, or freight vehicles carried on passenger vessels. Services carrying bulk cargo are ineligible for the Marine Highway Program unless the cargo is stored in containers or packages that are handled individually. As you can see, here are some of the examples that with some images. Next. As stated previously, the project designation open season is twice a year. The next deadline to submit application is by July 31st, 2020, and the following one is January 31st, 2021. Next slide. After your project has been designated by the Secretary of Transportation, USD will support your service with credibility of concept, clearinghouse of lessons learned based on information gathered and experience from other service to what worked and what did not work, opportunities to promote and developing partnerships and potentially linking with larger service, access to other government programs, and eligible to apply to the Marine Highway Grant Funding. Next. The Marine Highway Grants. Eligible applicants include applicants of designated projects which are public entities. or private entities with sponsorship of the applicants. The Marine Highway Grants funds can be used, as you can see some options here, for landside infrastructure, could be used for cargo handling equipment, vessel purchases. Funds can also be used for planning or preparation, and can also alleviate the upfront capital associated with starting new services. Next. The red dots are Marine Highway grants awarded in various parts of the country. We recently awarded new grants that added some new dots to the map, like grants in the American Samoa on the AS1, other dots in Indiana and Kentucky along the M70, and Illinois on the M35. And we're looking very much forward to continue spreading these dots because we want to seek new opportunities to grant projects that can further the Marine Highway service. Next. There, thank you. Since 2016, MARAD has provided $33.8 million in Marine Highway grants to 18 eligible Marine Highway projects. You can see here some of the list of awards that we've done since 2016. Next. Now, some grants to highlight that were awarded for different scope around the country are, for example, Texas, the Houston Gateway of Gulf Container Barge Central. This was awarded for operational plan development for a business case to support shipping container movements. Another one interesting that we want to highlight is just a different type of awards that have been given for projects to support the Marine Highway service program. The Wallops Island M95 Intermodal Barge Service. This was sponsored by the Virginia Commercial Space Flight Authority. The grant was to design a new trestle and combination dock ramp to support the loading and unloading of barges and research vessels at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport. And therefore, this is very interesting. Mars is trying to, instead of transporting rocket parts via highway, which is complicated, and sometimes they need to take down power cables to get across the highway because of their huge size, they're planning to transport those rockets using barge along the M95, interestingly. Another one is the Seattle Bainbridge Island. This one was awarded funds to convert a ferry from diesel to hybrid. I wanted to emphasize on this one a little bit more that these funds will go to the ferry that transport vehicles and some sort of freight. When funding for ferries, the funds cannot be awarded to ferries that only transport passengers. So either this ferry transport vehicles, so that's why it was eligible to apply for the Marine Highway program because that's part of the legislation. Another interesting one is the New York Harbor Container and Trailer and Barge Service. The grant funded new infrastructure at the terminal for more efficient loading and unloading of barges. Now, in addition, these funds were used to create crane operator training center that reduced costly hours of training usually done on live cranes. So that was a very, very interesting grant that was given. Now, I'm not going to be talking about the Port of Virginia or the Greater Baton Rouge ports because they're going to be providing more detail in their presentations about their project, their service. Next. Great. I love charts. It just gives you a picture of what's happening. These are the benefits of the Marine Highway funding. The first chart shows the number of containers shifted from the waterways. As you can see, in 2016, the number of TEUs went from 39,000 TEUs transported through the Marine Highway, in other words, taken out from the highways or rail, to in 2019 to 140,000. And 2020, we're still growing. Another one, the other chart groups the saving and truck miles avoided. So you can see 2016, the total saving, combining congestion savings and road maintenance savings, added up to $855,000 in change. Truck miles avoided was 19,000 miles. Now that going to 2019, where the total savings were $4.5 million in savings and 6 truck miles avoided. 2020, we're still growing. Those are impressive numbers that we're happy to share with all of you as the benefits of the Marine Highway program. Next. Before I say goodbye, well, of course I continue. I want to let you know that we have included the MARAD Gateway Office contact information as a handout. So you know, per your region, you will be able to coordinate and contact your Gateway director. With that being said, thank you so much for letting me express how we're excited we are with the Marine Highway program and this module that provides a wealth of information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauricio. Now we're going to our next poll question. Are you familiar with the Port Planning and Investment Toolkit? Give you a few more seconds. Looks like about 72% of you have voted. And it looks like the majority of you have heard of it, but have never used it. So thank you for your responses. I will now turn the presentation over to Aaron to share more about the Port Planning and Investment Toolkit.
Hello, I'm Aaron Ellis, Public Affairs Director for the American Association of Port Authorities, or simply AAPA. Thank you for participating in this webinar. We're very pleased to see such a great turnout for this presentation. I'd now like to focus on the new Marine Highway Projects module of the Port Planning and Investment Toolkit. The toolkit was developed as part of a cooperative agreement that began in 2014 between AAPA and MARAD. The Marine Highway module will be the toolkit's newest addition. Next. Today, America's coastal and inland ports are facing a number of key challenges, including a growing population, global freight chain shifts, and increased congestion in our ports and the intermodal transportation system. To address these challenges, ports must identify and define projects that are both operationally and financially attractive to their stakeholders, government agencies, investment partners, and ultimately the public. These projects also have to support the port's strategic objectives and have a reasonable likelihood for success in a given time frame. To help, AAPA and MARAD have developed an easy-to-follow toolkit with the assistance of roughly 75 U.S. port industry experts comprised of selected AAPA and MARAD staff, port employees, port professional management certification candidates, and consultants like WSP. This toolkit consists of a collection of modules that focus on various types of projects for ports of all sizes and all markets. The toolkit's purpose is to provide U.S. ports a valuable resource that offers a common framework and examples of best practices when planning, evaluating, and funding or financing freight transportation, facility, and other port-related improvement projects. You can see the toolkit's individual goals in the slide on your screen here. Next. Each toolkit module is comprised of an introduction that provides the purpose and need of the module, as well as the context and outline, and 3 sections that are aligned with the primary phases involved in project definition. And those are planning, feasibility, and financing. Next. To date, the toolkit concludes an introduction and user's guide, a general projects module, an intelligent transportation system module, a port concession evaluation model, and a resource catalog. For more information about the toolkit, we invite you to check it out on either the AAPA or the MARAD website. The URLs to the toolkit are listed here on your screen. Coming this summer will be the Marine Highway Projects module we're discussing in today's webinar that will provide an overview of the America's Marine Highway Program and a detailed analysis of how marine highway services can become designated projects by the U.S. Department of Transportation. Looking ahead, MARAD and AAPA are exploring development of other modules for the future. After this webinar, one of the questions we hope you'll answer in the follow-up survey is what module topic or topics would you like to see addressed in a future update of the toolkit? Next. Finally, for my part, I'd like to acknowledge the generous assistance and guidance provided by the Marine Highway Module Advisory Group listed here that includes representatives from U.S. ports, industry solution providers, and marine highway supporters. Thanks to these contributors, we've developed what we feel is a valuable resource that ports can use to provide capacity for the future, efficiently integrate landside connections, and meet the societal needs of the wider community. Next. I'll now turn the presentation back over to our moderator, Shannon, to pull up the third poll question.
Thank you, Aaron. Are you interested in applying for an AMH project designation or grant within the next year? Give you a few more seconds. Looks like 61% of you voted, and the majority of you are currently not interested, but may be interested in the future. I will turn the presentation over to Alan, who will discuss the Marine Highway Projects module.
Thank you, Shannon. Next. So following up on the introduction of how this fits into the full port planning toolkit, the work in the Marine Highway module really tries to follow the same structure as the other module elements. There's a planning component, a feasibility component, and a financing component. And the effort here is to really make that structure applicable to the specific opportunities and challenges in planning and developing marine highway projects. It's developed with an eye to meeting the Maritime Administration's established goals for marine highway service, relieving landside congestion and emissions, reducing cost for marine freight shippers, improving the reliability of the system as a whole, where possible, providing a faster route than trucking, particularly in congested urban areas, reducing wear and tear on roadways, and achieving other public benefits. To do that, the planning module really talks about the initial stages of planning in terms of setting goals and objectives, establishing stakeholder relationships, collecting data, quantifying what's going on in terms of existing conditions and also future possibilities, and then formulating and testing alternatives and plans. Next. Typical areas of data collection that are engaged in and required in marine planning activities. There's a range of topic areas. Not all of these are part of every planning effort, but these are the things that have come up in a lot of the past practices. Things like strategic and legislative questions, relationship to port planning documents, to regional planning, to public-private partnership regulations. On the infrastructure side, what facility assets are available, what are the requirements what kinds of future site plans are in place in adjoining areas where you're considering a marine highway service. Operational factors at seaports and inland river ports today in terms of their carrier fleet, their operational activity in terms of cargo, the terminal assets. Market demand, which is a really key part of the analysis. Where are the key freight origins and destinations? What are shippers looking for? What does the past and past successes say about the future? And finally, the financing side. What are the operating costs, capital costs of services? What are the competing rates that are being offered by truck or by rail? What is really a financial picture that represents a win-win-win for all players, for the ports, for the public sector, for carriers, and for customers? Next. Engaging stakeholders is a critical component of this process, and the folks that are typically consulted are the shippers, carriers, and distributors of goods, potential customers and users, service providers, shipping lines or carriers, port owners, local, regional, state government partners, local interest groups, and all of these are important. Some may be more important than others in certain kinds of contexts. For example, if we're dealing with the continuing inland move of ocean cargo, it may be really important to get, for example, a through bill of lading from the ocean carrier that moves the cargo to an inland destination on a single bill to make it easier. In other cases, it may be other factors, but all of these groups are important. Next. The importance of state and MPO and regional planning coordination is important to remember as well, because the consistency of marine highway planning and the integration of marine highway planning into those state and regional planning documents can form a basis for making sure that the recommendations are consistent with larger transportation objectives. There are state relationships and regional relationships that can be leveraged, particularly in terms of highway and rail improvements to and from sites, getting the funding in place, and basically making sure that the marine highway is a recognized portion of state and regional transportation plans and acknowledged as a potential solution. That policy support, hopefully translates into funding support through our regional capital programs, through sponsorship for federal grants and for other funding opportunities. But building that awareness at the state and regional level of the potential for marine highway benefits and activities, it becomes a two-way win scenario and can advance projects very well. Next. Understanding existing conditions is a key part of data analysis, and it's a little bit different if you're dealing with an established port site versus a new port site, but the menu is pretty comparable. We're always interested in understanding the physical layout and development planned around existing ports, the equipment and structures that are there, the operational volumes, the capabilities, the available capacity that there is in terms of berths, upland storage that's covered or open, how to best locate a marine highway service within an existing terminal in a way that's compatible with existing and planned future operations, any sort of environmental or development constraints on site use and service introduction. Looking at new sites, and that's sometimes the case for marine highway services. There are the additional considerations of local land use, development and real estate pressures on the sites, community conditions and concerns, environmental conditions and concerns. All these become part of the alternatives analysis. Access, of course, is a critical factor to capture and understand for navigation channel conditions, berth availability and constraints, and also importantly for the best possible truck and rail access to and from the site, so that the inland port can serve as many customers as possible. We're always looking at current conditions, planned improvements, future baselines to ensure that we're planning for sustainable services over time. Next. Market demand is a key component of the analysis, and there are a lot of different ways to do this. There's no one size fits all, but there are some kind of general guideposts that can help in this process. Often, market demand for marine highways starts with an analysis of larger national freight data sets, like the Freight Analysis Framework, Transborder Trade, Waterborne Commerce. But the goal of analyzing those data sets is to look at what's moving by water today, what's not moving by water today that could be, that looks like it should be based on commodity type or origin destination pair. And that becomes the basis for kind of a set of capture targets that a market demand then seeks to drill down into. And the primary way to drill down into that is to try and reach into the direct customer feedback area as quickly as possible. Find one or two or three key anchor tenants with a demonstrable interest in the service, and figure out what's in their mind. What do they need? What are their logistics requirements, their service requirements? What kind of volumes are they generating over time? How do they feel about the sites that you're looking at? What's their tolerance for risk in terms of using a new service in lieu of just having a truck pull up the way it always has? What kind of cost profile are they interested in terms of a price that they're willing to pay for services? Overall, that becomes kind of a program that you can aim the development scenarios at meeting. And if you meet it for anchors and it's successful, there's a likelihood of growing the service to serve more comparable types of businesses. You need to develop service cost estimates from kind of an initial pro forma. Developing a pro forma that aims to meet those customer needs in the simplest possible way. What are the costs for vessels, fuel, labor, capital recovery? How is that influenced by your volume estimates, by your load versus empty ratios, and other factors that go into per unit pricing? And that positions you to do a competitive assessment and determine whether the service you have in mind represents a good value proposition for the users. Does it offer a better combination of cost, reliability, speed, visibility, and security compared to the other modes and choices available to potential customers? Marine Highway usually trades speed for cost and reliability, although not always. But there's always a trade-off and a balance between these factors, and different shippers and different customers want different things. It's really important to understand what the targets are. Next. Competitive analysis typically covers things like, and I won't go through all of these, but these will be in the toolkit document. Things like the mileage by mode, the travel time, customer price, reliability and availability. Faster is not always better, as long as it's reliable. Sometimes a shipper can take a 2-day delay if they know that the stuff is going to be exactly where it's supposed to be on time, compared to maybe getting stuck in traffic and not showing up until 6 hours late. Next. The alternatives development process really seeks to build on that basic understanding of how to meet customer needs with framing the best possible service to meet those needs. And you start to look at variations in schedules and headways, in vessel types and capacities, in different load factors and volume factors between origins and destinations, whether you're looking at a simple pendulum service or a more complex multi-stop routing service. More stops gives you the opportunity to capture more traffic at more ports, but it's at the risk of longer schedule time and longer fuel costs, and it may be a positive, it may not be. It's worth testing a variety of opportunities. Generally, these services will want to aim for a sailing minimum of 1 per week scheduled, but then you can bring it up to 2 or 3 or 4 or even daily if the volumes allow. We need to look at scheduling from the marine side in terms of the number of vessels you need to keep in cycle to manage and maintain the schedule based on port loading, transit, and unloading times. And then also consider the schedule from the customer's standpoint. What does it take to get from their front door to a marine highway port, through the system, back out the other side, and end-to-end delivered? On the vessel side, we typically consider a variety of vessel types, everything from high-end, fast self-powered vessels offering the fastest performance but at the highest cost, down to the very, very simple, lowest cost deck, barge, and tow. Not fast, but very inexpensive to acquire and operate, and may do the job. Either can work, and we look to test both typically. Next. In terms of feasibility analysis, this can be done in a variety of ways. It can be done informally through a set of category assessments, or it can be done very formally through a scoring matrix and weighting factors to come up with statistical factors. The key is that in assessing feasibility, that the applicants are considering all of the factors that are relevant to their decision framework and to the customer's framework. Revenue streams, development and operating costs, pricing, labor requirements, impacts, and risks, and wrapping all of that into the feasibility assessment is critical to moving ahead. Next. Benefit cost analysis may be part of that process. It doesn't have to be for a designation under the process that Mauricio discussed. The federal designation of projects does require the analysis of benefits, but it doesn't require formal benefit cost analysis the same way a build or an infra grant does. You may elect to proceed down that path, though, just to understand how your projects would score if you were to submit them for build or infra or other discretionary grant applications. The benefit cost analysis is specified in very nicely written federal guidance on how to do these things, but it basically talks about how you measure public benefits derived from transportation effects, safety, state of good repair, economic competitiveness, environmental protection, quality of life. These effects are monetized and then discounted back, typically over 20 or 30 years. Importantly, the federal benefit cost analysis does not aim to capture job, wage, economic impact, economic development impacts. Those are things that are very important in making development decisions about services, and particularly the relationship between marine highway ports and the lands around them, because the economic development opportunity for the land around them is often a really key reason to do these projects. That doesn't get reflected in benefit cost analysis. The key thing about benefit cost analysis is you're looking to optimize the relationship between the cost of your project, shown on the x-axis here, and the value of the project in terms of cargo benefiting or cargo volume on the y-axis. The lower the cost, the higher the volume, the better your project will score, and the more competitive it'll be in a kind of a federal discretionary grant world for under things like build and infra. Next. On the financing side, typically these projects have a variety of funding sources that are assembled and collected, and there are many different programs available. These will be specified in the toolkit, but the key is that once you've identified a competitive, cost-effective project that's well grounded in market analysis, there are a variety of these sources that are available to you. Next. So overall, there are just many paths through the process. They typically follow these stages of planning, feasibility, and financing. There's typically a feedback loop from one back to the other, so that you're aiming to come up with the best project at the least cost. The key to the process is really the mix of local leadership combined with federal support and federal resources. And through this kind of planning process, we've seen a number of really exciting success stories emerge, and you'll be hearing about some of those later in the module. So Shannon, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Now for our next poll question. Does your state or region provide incentives such as tax credits, reduced fees, or grants to use domestic marine transportation? I'll give you a few seconds to vote. Closing the poll. Looks like the majority of you have either no incentives or you're not sure. I'll pass it off to the Port of Virginia, who has the benefit of having state incentives. Actually. Aaron?
Sorry, I was muted.
No worries.
Good afternoon. This is Damian LeGrand with the Port of Virginia. So Alan laid out a lot of the inner workings of Marine Highway Terminal, and so I was going to talk about how we put those to practice and how we've been successful with our Richmond Marine Terminal. Next. So here, obviously, is a picture of the state of Virginia. You can see down in the far bottom right part of the state, which is Hampton Roads. That's where our major marine terminals are located. The two that we handle containers at our Virginia International Gateway and Norfolk International Terminals. So those would be the two facilities that our barge service calls when they're taking containers to and from the Richmond Marine Terminal, which you see in the center of the state, which is on the James River, roughly 80 miles inland. And just at the top of the state there, I wanted to touch on the Virginia Inland Port, which was a facility that was built in the late 80s to with the same concept as of a river terminal, but it's served by Norfolk Southern Rail. Next. So here at the Port of Virginia, we handled just over 2.9 million TEUs in our 2019 fiscal year. So we are the third largest port on the East Coast. Here you'll see the breakdown of our traffic. So of course, truck is going to be the largest player, followed by rail. And then of course, we have our barge service. So the barge numbers are made up of two services, one that we have to the Richmond Marine Terminal, and then also one that travels up the Chesapeake Bay to the Port of Baltimore. Next. So when we're out selling the inland terminals to our customers, we really are boasting the advantages that many have talked about before me of less congestion, more reliable service, getting slugs of freight at a central location that cuts down the truck travel time. So this slide here really depicts what we strive for here with our sales team. Is you can look at how much further the trucker can reach in a day's time, or to possibly do a round trip in that day. This became more important as the electronic logs regulations were rolled out. So this gives the motor carriers an advantage because now they can pick up their containers in Richmond and even make it as far as Roanoke, Virginia in a full day and make it back to Richmond, where if they were going from Hampton Roads, you're talking, you're not going to make it back. It would be closer to 6 hours each way. So that's a big piece of what we do. And, of course, our first barge was called the 64 Express, and that was because we're taking trucks off of the major highway, Interstate 64, which if anyone who's ever traveled that is sometimes can be a treat. Next. So when we look at, we began the barge service in 2008. At that time, the Port of Virginia was not heavily involved, other than the fact we were helping to market and facilitate. But in 2015, we signed a 40-year lease with the city of Richmond. And that really allowed us to leverage our relationships with the steamship lines and also use our commercial relationships with the beneficial cargo owners to help grow the Richmond Marine Terminal and the barge service there. So as you can see, these numbers, as we stand currently in our fiscal year 20, as we sit today, we're going to be very close to hitting or exceeding our 40,000 container moves this year. So, we'll talk more about how we reach that growth and what we see in the future. Next. So on the left, you see a picture of the Richmond Marine Terminal. And on the right, of course, is a container barge. So we have two barges that we have in service currently. They both have the capacity of 120 FEUs. So the model that we're using today is what we call the drop and swap, where we're using one tug to power both barges, except one's being dropped off in Richmond while the other barge is going down to Hampton Roads and vice versa. So the tug is not waiting for these barges to be worked. This allows us to go up to 5 sailings a week within a 7-day period. And then if we need to, we can put the second tug into service, which will give us full 6 round trips per week. As Alan mentioned, the importance of a bill of lading. this is huge and has been critical in our success in Richmond. When we first started, we were running somewhat as a truck would. We were not offering bill of ladings, or the ship lines were not offering bill of ladings. But now you can have a Shanghai to Richmond rate or bill of lading, and that's big for the customers because Richmond becomes their start and stop point for picking up loaded containers and dropping back off their empties. So they don't have to worry about getting that container all the way back to Norfolk under any type of time crunch. Once it comes in the gate there in Richmond, it's off the clock. So that's been a big piece to our success. Now, and then also at the terminals, we've been very fortunate. Our partners at MARAD have been very gracious and have provided us with some great equipment. One I'd like to specifically point out is our GenPack, that it's a 40-foot container that has the generator inside and 40 plugs on the outside. That has allowed us to handle refrigerated cargo on the barge, which we've been fortunate enough to land two of big accounts there that use the reefer plugs, and one being Lidl Grocery Stores, which is a German-based grocery chain, and also we have a large wine importer that's that Winebow that's using the barge. When we look, one thing I wanted to touch on is lessons learned. We really have through this process, I would say the biggest thing for a operation such as this and using a barge on the river is communication. We have constant communication with our partners, our ship lines, our beneficial cargo owners, our motor carriers, because it's not, we do have variables. We have weather, we have capacity constraints at times, and those are things we all work through together. And we make sure if there's any hot containers that need to be moved, we expedite those and keep our levels of service up, and also to make sure our customers are confident in the product. Next. So I just wanted to show some of our larger customers that are utilizing the barge, and also talk about a big piece that was also mentioned, and that is the movement of two-way freight. So we try to minimize the movement of empty containers on the barge, and that is a challenge in itself at times, because sometimes you'll have plenty of blue containers, but you need yellow ones, and vice versa. So we work hard with our exporters, and the ones here to note are Westrock. Schooler Grain just built a $2.5 million facility on the Port of Richmond to load soybean containers. So they're capitalizing on our generation of empties at the site, so they can load heavy and they don't have to put their trucks on the road. We have Allegheny Wood Products, which is AWP. They're actually trucking to and from Allegheny, West Virginia, because of, again, the truck time allows them to do a full turn in the day. And then we have a big player, DuPont, that's also capitalizing on that. Next. So the picture on the left, I want to speak to before I hand it over to my colleague Aaron. You can see across from the Richmond Marine Terminal, we have a grass field or a dirt pad next to a new building. And those on that previous slide, that would be the new building for Brother International, which is the fax machine printer company. They built 500,000 square feet across the street and are utilizing Richmond. We have Amazon, who recently opened 500,000 square feet over there. We also have Bissell Vacuum Cleaner, Lidl Grocery Store, who I mentioned. So all of these have been economic development wins that have come about just because of the Port of Richmond. So those, that speaks well to our success and to the fact that the customers are willing to invest into our operation because of the reliability that they've experienced. And now I'd like to pass it over to my colleague Aaron Ouellette to talk about economic development and the tax codes.
Thanks, Daniel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aaron Ouellette. I'm on the economic development team at the Port of Virginia. What you're looking at right here, as Daniel explained, this is our bread and butter on the economic development team at the Port. We love to see business attraction and business expansion. As you can see here in fiscal year 2019, we have 45 businesses expand or locate within the state, over 3 million square feet added, over $2 billion invested across Virginia, and 2,800 jobs created in the state. As a catalyst for commerce, the Port of Virginia is driving business to and from Virginia and the contiguous states. All the numbers that are shown on this slide is a result of the collaboration between Virginia Economic Development Partnership, VEDP, our local city county economic development partners, and all of our stakeholders. Next slide, please. Speaking of collaboration, the Port, in partnership with the General Assembly of Virginia, introduced a series of tax credits back in 2011 and a grant program in 2014. All these tax credits that you see right here were created to offset transportation costs for companies that are using the port. I'm going to briefly breeze through these real quick and try to cover it all in my allotted time. But the Port of Virginia Port Volume Increase Tax Credit is for companies that have increased volume over the previous year. You at least need to increase volume by 5% in order to qualify for this tax credit, and you get $50 per TEU in access over the previous year. This is our most popular tax credit. Last year we had around 30 to 40 applicants, and over $3 million was allotted out. So we have a cap of $3.2 million every year, and you're allowed to carry that tax credit up for up to 5 years. Some companies have a hard time using all the funds within the first couple of years, so they do carry it over, especially if you don't have the taxable liability within that first year. On to the next one. The next tax credit, the barge and rail usage tax credit, was created to incentivize the use of the 64 Express that Daniel alluded to before, which is Virginia's green transportation system, to induce a modal shift from the asphalt highway to the marine highway. This shift produces transportation system benefits, economic development opportunities, and mitigates the transportation impact in the movement of goods. This tax credit is only available to those companies that move volume through the barge or the rail through the Port of Virginia. They can get $25 per TEU in excess over the previous year. They do have to have an increase of volume over the previous year. And there is a cap of $500,000 every year, and they can also carry forward that tax credit for up to 5 years. And the last one is very interesting. It's the International Trade Facility Tax Credit. It's similar to the port volume increase. You have to increase volume by 5% or more over the previous year. And it's kind of a twofold. So the applicant can either claim a job creation portion or a capital investment portion. If they go the job creation route, they can get $3,500 per full-time employee created, or they can get 2% of the capital investment back from all their expenditures. So we leave it up to the company to decide which route they'll make more money back in return, and they can carry that grant out to 10 years, for up to 10 years, or that tax credit up to 10 years. And there is a cap of $1.25 million per year. Next slide, please. Now, this is our POV grant, our Economic and Infrastructure Development Grant Program. This was created for companies that either locate or expand within the state of Virginia and use the port and create at least 25 new full-time positions. As you can see down at the bottom, it's based off of a gradual scale. From 25 to 49 is $1,000. It goes all the way up to 100 plus new jobs created. You get $3,000 per job. There is a cap of $500,000. If we click on the next slide, you can see that we have our previous grant recipients highlighted in dark blue around the state. You can see they're scattered all throughout the state, which is very nice. We have 17 previous grant recipients. The job count was over 2,300 jobs created for this grant, for the grant applicants, and over $4.8 million awarded. Last year, or this past year, we've had 4 grant applicants, and that was totaling over $1.2 million just this year. So we had 2 out in Richmond, 1 in Northern Virginia, and 1 in Southwestern Virginia. So we like to see that scattered cluster of different companies and scattered around the state. So you could also see in the teal color is potential grant recipients. Those are for companies that have expanded or located in the state that we're keeping track of. They haven't quite created those full-time positions yet, but we know that they're coming, and so we want to keep track on when they might apply and if they're applicable. So it's looking promising for the future of this grant, and we continue to grow the funding for it and continue to grow all the applicants. So I believe my time is up, but I want to flip over to the next slide to show Daniel's and my contact information. So please feel free to contact us, and if you have any questions or concerns, we're happy to help. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Daniel. I did want to remind everyone to use your chat box in the lower right-hand corner, I'm assuming, on the toolbar to ask any questions. And for our final poll question, are you interested in engaging a private partner or public entity to support a marine highway service? I'll give you a few more seconds. And closing the poll. It looks like 33% of you are interested in engaging a private entity. Our next presenter, Greg Johnson, will discuss how his port did actually have the opportunity to work with a private entity.
Thank you, Shannon. Good afternoon. I'm Greg Johnson, Director of Business Development for the Port of Greater Baton Rouge. Today, I plan to give you an overview of a public port authority's role in the marine highway model. This service provides positioning of empty containers from the Memphis area via container on barge liner service to the Port of Greater Baton Rouge for loading export plastic resins from local shippers in the Baton Rouge area for export on international container lines at the Port of New Orleans. The service is also designed to move import containers to the Port of Baton Rouge and the Memphis area. In 2015, the Maritime Administration reached out to Secor AMH, who was operating a container on barge service on the Tennessee Tombigbee waterway system, about the possibility of running a similar operation on the Mississippi River. The Gulf region and New Orleans specifically have an equipment availability problem with the number of exports exceeding import container volumes. There is a consistent supply of empty equipment in Memphis from import traffic that can be used to supply export cargo needs in the Baton Rouge area. While the Port of New Orleans was fully equipped with operating container terminals on the Mississippi River, no additional equipment was needed to accommodate the container on barge service there. The terminals in Memphis and Baton Rouge had no intermodal or container stevedore equipment and would need to be completely equipped. Almost immediately, the partners began identifying equipment needs for the 2 terminals. The grant application was submitted to MARAD for assistance in equipping the terminals for efficient operations. Secor AMH made the substantial initial investment in procuring enough container handling equipment to begin the operations. This included a dedicated towboat, barges, 2 cranes, and several intermodal handling machines for the terminals in Memphis and Baton Rouge. Secor hired a third-party contractor to provide equipment and stevedoring services in Baton Rouge while operating their own terminal in Memphis. Next. The local shippers needed to have confidence that, one, the ports could handle the volumes, meet cutoffs, and maintain schedules to connect with vessels loading in the Port of New Orleans. Two, that the port of empty containers would be readily available and maintained. Next. For several years, the lower Mississippi River flood stage episodes would last 3 to 6 weeks a couple of times a year. One stage would be in the January-February timeframe, the next usually during the spring or early summer. In 2019, we experienced over 9 months of above flood stage conditions, which in turn caused several delays with the intercoastal lock queue, as well as the effect on the Mississippi River transit portion of the service. The high river stage and the extreme currents provided unique challenges to maintain the schedule departure and arrival times necessary to meet the vessel's cutoffs in the Port of New Orleans. Additionally, in the past 4 years, we've experienced 2 hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico, and in 2016, a severe flood in the Baton Rouge, New Orleans corridor. These events postponed vessel arrivals and departures, as well as interruptions in our schedules. Next. With all the partners contributing their portions and agreeing this service could be viable, Port of Baton Rouge was able to re-energize a very underutilized asset, a terminal valued at $15 million, perfectly suited and modified for this type of service. With the former service, the port took measures to design and enhance the capabilities of the strength of the concrete marshaling yard to accommodate loaded containers, along with the sizable equipment necessary to move these containers. As the service grew, the Port of Baton Rouge recently completed another 4-acre concrete expansion with lighting to accommodate additional storage of containers. We opened that today. In 2017, our service was awarded a U.S. Department of Transportation MARAD grant to enable the Port of Baton Rouge to work with a U.S. manufacturer, Taylor Machine Works, located in Louisville, Mississippi, to design and build a state-of-the-art reach stacker, which will enable our terminal operator to load containers directly into the barge without utilizing a separate crane. This reach stacker is a one-of-a-kind machine that took 18 to 24 months to engineer and design. The machine went into production in the fall of 2019, and we're expecting delivery in November of 2020. In addition, as a result of the MARAD grant, a top pick forklift capable of stacking containers 5 high was procured and placed into service in November 2019 in the Port of Baton Rouge terminal, further enhancing our storage capabilities in the terminal. Next. While there were no guarantees, and with all the efforts and investments of our partners, the planning and implementation of our project kicked off in June of 2016. In the first 6 months, we moved approximately 3,300 40-foot containers. In 2019, we moved roughly 14,000 containers, mostly 40-foot containers with a few hundred 20-foot containers mixed in. Next. Through our partnership, our Marine Highway Service has provided our local shippers an alternative to moving their products on the water. Having this service in many instances allows the loading of the full capacity of the containers versus the limited highway regulated weight limit. Our service utilizes river hopper type barges capable of moving 36 loaded 40-foot containers per barge on the water. An additional added benefit of this service is the ability to source empty containers from the Memphis market to Baton Rouge, enabling the steamship line to implement an Asian service from the Port of New Orleans to several Far East ports. The beauty of this type of service is that if a local shipper has a campaign or additional sales, additional barges can be readily outfitted and added to the schedule as needed to accommodate more containers. This initiative has taken a large number of trucks off the highway in 2 very congested metropolitan areas, the city of Baton Rouge and the city of New Orleans. As our local shippers get more comfortable with the Marine Highway Service, we feel certain the volumes will continue to grow. It's our position that the port authorities should remain a landlord role in this endeavor and continue to provide the excellent facilities in both ports where the cargo can continue to flow unimpeded. This venture has become one of the more unique, successful public-private partnerships on the Mississippi River. Joining us today for this webinar is our partner, Rich Tubner. He's the Vice President of SECOR AMH. Rich will be available to answer questions during the question and answer portion of this presentation. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Greg. We'll now go to open up the session for questions in the last few minutes that we have remaining. If you could please submit your questions using the chat box feature. And if you have a question for a specific presenter, please state so in your submission. So let's see what questions we have. It looks like we have a question for Daniel and Aaron. What has helped the Virginia service between Hampton Roads and Richmond be successful beyond the initial CMAQ and Marine Highway funding grants? Daniel, it looks like you're muted if you want to take the question.
Daniel, you want to take that?
Still muted. There he goes.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So really, when we look at the funding, and of course we've had a lot of support over the years, but really it was being able to bring our product to the marketplace at a competitive rate. Of course, knowing that these models are tough to, it's not break even out of the gate. So we did have to use some subsidy to help make our rate competitive at the start. And our model really was building off of growing the two-way freight. So having pay and freight going both directions. The way we offer it to our ship lines currently is our loaded rate is a higher rate and our empty rate is a discounted rate. So the idea behind that is the ship lines are going to charge the customer for both directions. That's just how they do it with the rail and everything else. It's always a round trip rate. So we needed to discount a portion of that to make sure we fall within that the sweet spot of what does our barge rate plus a local dray equal in comparison to an all motor truck move to that market. So it's really been that fine balance. Now we're at the point where we are moving at times during grain season, we're moving close to 75% of our empty containers back to Hampton Roads loaded. So that's what's really helped us move forward. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. We have another question. Will the slides with the links be shared? Yes, we will share the slides. They will be available at a future date on the AAPA website. Let's see, for MERA, does a designated project have to be in service to begin?
Yes, hello.
Go ahead.
I can answer that. Thank you so much for that question. For a project designation per the legislation is for new or existing service. So you can apply for a conceptual service for a project designation. It just has to be sponsored by a public entity and on a marine highway route.
Thank you, Mauricio. Daniel and Aaron, what initial process did your group take to involve the state of Virginia to create tax credits?
That's a great question. That was before my time at the port, but I know that we have a backing of legislators that understand the port needs, and I think our group here speaks to them on a regular basis. So I believe that was a need for us to create some incentives that incentivizes other, basically offsets transportation costs for companies. So that was our motive back in 2011 to get that going. So I know it was full backing behind our legislators to get that the funding approved. I can find out more information for whoever asks. I can provide that to Shannon once I receive that.
Thank you. Another question, how much does environmental impact, such as air and water quality, influence grants, and what is the % weight that this carries in the decision?
Yes, I can answer that question as well in a way. And then if Tim and Fred are on the line as well, they can chip as well, elaborate. For the Marine Highway grants, there's no BCA that needs to be done. There's only just benefits of the benefits of transporting within the Marine Highway. There's no threshold, minimum or maximum. So if you can just show, and we have provided that in our legislation and on our resource materials, that you just have to include what would the benefit in transporting in using the Marine Highway service and how much will be the benefits, but there's no threshold for minimum or maximum. And if you have further questions, want to continue this conversation, please just email me. My information is listed right at the presentation. And the Marine Highway program will very much be available to answer more questions. Thank you.
And I can elaborate on that a little more. Shannon.
Go ahead.
As far as the benefits, for each appropriation, of course, there's a notice of funding opportunity that's published in the Federal Register as well. But we're actually looking at certain criterias in that Federal Register, which will be affiliated with public benefits, which is legislated under the program. So congestion and mitigation is one of the criteria that we're looking at, but it's not the only ones.
Thank you, Fred. Another question for, I guess, Mauricio. Can you explain the financial responsibility when a public entity sponsors the project designation application?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. The financial, that's actually in between the public entity and the private entity. It could be done in various ways. When there's a Marine Highway, first let's differentiate, there's a project designation part where this just first applying for the designation. There's no funding included right there from MARAD to the applicant. So that's the public entity applying with the support of a private, with the support of a private entity. In that situation, there's no monetary right there. You're just designating your service, that already existing service or the new conceptual service. When internally between the public entity and the private, that's how applying for a grant with the cost share or anything, that's something that there's no financial that we see that's in between the public and the private entity. So having said that, depends on how the partnership association comes in between the public and the private entity. But within MARAD, we just want to see that there's a partnership done, but there's no actual funding included or financial responsibility that we require.
Thanks, Mauricio. Another one, does a designated project have to be in service to begin receiving MARAD grant funding?
This is Tim Pickering. I run the Marine Highway program. No, it does not have to be in service. We have funded, say in some cases we fund like the engineering studies to, for the site, to locate a site or to build where they want to build a service, a pier at a dock. And we have provided equipment to start a service before the service has actually started. So to answer the question, no.
Thank you, Tim. Some public agencies are uneasy to sponsor private operators' project designation applications. They need more education on this issue? Like, really a question. Would you like to expand on that?
Can you repeat the question, please?
It's more of a statement, which you might want to expand upon. It says some public agencies are uneasy to sponsor private operators' project designation applications, and they need more education on this issue.
Yes, and if they do, please get in touch with the gateway directors in your area or contact us. We can set up a conference call or something with them, a WebEx, to discuss the process and to show them that there's really getting the designation itself is a no risk proposition because it simply gets you the designation from the secretary. There's no financial obligations or anything of that nature at that point.
That question was from Eric Shin. I just so we have clarification, I've opened Eric's mic up. Eric, if you want to provide some feedback.
Sure. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
I posed a question because I sort of know the answer, but I think a lot of agencies may want to hear the answers from our staff. Because the project designation application requires a public entity to sponsor, and that often creates the hesitation right from the get-go. So on the phone, on the webinar, if they are public agencies that are concerned about this particular requirements, they should reach out to their gateway directors, as Tim suggested, and so that they could understand the process better. Therefore, they are willing to partner with their private operators within their region. And back to you.
Thank you, Eric. I know that Greg had mentioned the fact that MARAD had reached out to SECOR and connected them with the Port of Greater Baton Rouge, and they were unaware of the fact that SECOR might be interested. So I think that it goes both ways. One more question: does project designation make a project more viable for other DOT funding, such as BUILD or PIDP or infra?
Well, I guess the answer to that would be no. It doesn't. There's nothing in their notice of funding or in the rules for those particular programs that reference the project designation.
Could you clarify? I'd heard the same, that if you receive a Marine Highway Project designation, that you are looked more kindly upon your other grant applications? Or it does not factor in whatsoever?
I would have to defer to someone who works on those specific grant programs that might be able to answer that, but I do know that there's nothing in the rule that does that.
May I add to what Tim is expressing right now? Can you guys hear me? Yes, right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. There's nothing, when the NOFO comes out for the BUILD or PIDP, there's nothing that says that it will look more favorable if you're a Marine Highway Program designated project. However, it does give some sort of credibility of concept as having a Marine Highway project designation overall as a federal designation, because it has already been vetted and reviewed by Department of Transportation. So as Tim stated, the NOFO for those programs doesn't state anything, doesn't mention anything about the Marine Highway Program itself. However, it does give you that sort of type, a little bit more status into creativity of concept for other grants or other programs that are looking for in stating that it is a service, if conceptual or new service, it is a service that has been reviewed and is about to launch, or is it an existing service that is consistent, reliable, and everything else?
Yeah, and we have heard from some of our designated projects that they have used the designation when they take that to their financial institutions, their private financial institutions. They've been able to get a reduced rate on loans or higher lines of credit as a result of the I guess having the weight of having that document behind them, the DOT behind them.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Mauricio. There was one question about the recording for today's presentation. We're exploring options on how to get that onto potentially AEPA's website, and we'll let the participants know once that occurs. I'm going to thank you so much. So just to be respectful of people's time, we have reached the 90 minutes. So I'm going to pass it off to Aaron to conclude the webinar with a few closing remarks.
Hi again, this is Aaron Ellis, AEPA's Public Affairs Director. I want to thank you all for participating in today's Marine Highway Module webinar for the Port Planning and Investment Toolkit. One of the questions that kept coming up over and over, and I just wanted to address this, is that the recording of this webinar will be sent to you as a link for everybody who participated, and we will likely be posting it when we post the Marine Highway module along with that module later this summer. But if you have any questions about the webinar or anything that was covered in this, please send it to me. Again, Aaron Ellis, and I'll give you my email address. It's AELLIS@AAPA-ports.org. So with that, I think we'll just go ahead and conclude, and thank you again. We hope to connect with you in a future webinar or at an activity that may be coming up in the future in which we can provide another service. We'd love to do this.
Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.